You are now in the Underdog Sports Fantasy Hour. I am Josh Dunn. I am joined, as always, by Anshu. And Anshu, this is a special occasion because we are recording in person for the first time in a long time. Very excited. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm very pumped. I'm right next to you. I'm feeling your vibes. It's going really well. I'm excited for this episode.
I am as well, and we're going to get to some games coming up here this weekend. We're recording late in the week, so hopefully you guys get a chance to check this thing out in time to set your fantasy lineups. But we did have a game on Thursday night, and we wanted to react to that. The big news there, obviously, was the end of the game and what happened with Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. So obviously I want to hear your knee-jerk reaction to the way that all happened, what transpired. Obviously we had some fines and some suspensions that have been assessed. Myles Garrett's at least out for the rest of the season. You had Marquise Pouncey, who's going to get 3 games, and it looks like Mason Rudolph just with a fine at this point. But I mean, aside from the football that took place on the field, what did you think of everything that took place at the end of the game with the helmet interaction?
Yeah, I mean, Larry Ogunjobi also going to miss a game. He's probably their second best defensive player. And then Demarius Randall out for the probably going to be fined or suspended. He gets ejected from that game. Morgan Burnett, the safety, out for the season. He had a great game. I mean, this is a Browns team that had a chance. When you look at their schedule down the stretch, they have the Bengals twice. They have the Dolphins. They have the Steelers, of course, in what will be a vaunted rematch in a few weeks. Like, they had a chance to, maybe not run the table, but certainly put themselves in the discussion now for the playoffs. Now, it's going to be really tough, even though, and especially with the way that ended, I think it clouds what could have been like a really great end of the season for them for the second straight year.
Yeah, I mean, both of these teams kind of in a desperation spot. Obviously, Pittsburgh has an easy schedule down the stretch. I know the Browns also have a very easy schedule down the stretch, so there should be some wins for both of these teams. But obviously, what changes with that defense? I mean, they lose their best player in Myles Garrett. Obviously, Freddie Kitchens has been really under the gun as far as whether or not his job is going to be safe. I know it's his first year, but he's been terrible, and it's been in crucial moments that there have been a lot of really, really bad play calls. We do have a lot of games that we want to get to. There's 13 games on the slate still to go this weekend. We want to get to all of those. The lines that we're going to be going through are on bovadasportsbook.com, so definitely, if you're not checking them out, we will be giving them to you here. But we'll start it off with, we had Dallas-Detroit, so that's the first game of the weekend. Dallas comes in as 7-point favorites on the road, and the big story here is that Matt Stafford's going to miss another game with the back injury.
That's right. Jeff Driscoll goes on the road at Chicago last week, holds his own, had a chance to win the game at the end of it against a pretty good Bears defense. They didn't quite get it done, but I think that it bodes well from a fantasy perspective in terms of, having, Galladay and Jones and even Ty Johnson to a certain extent, who gets cleared from the concussion. So I think in TJ Hawkinson, even if you're desperate for a tight end, I think that generally that drop off from Stafford to Driscoll doesn't seem like it's going to be crippling. I mean, we'll see if it was just a 1 week flash in the pan or if it's more than that. But I think that ultimately, you're not suffering a huge downgrade with your Lions this week. And then from the other side, you've got the Cowboys. And they go into Detroit, and this, it seems like almost a get-right spot when you play Detroit, despite the fact that you've got Darius Slay, you've got Justin Coleman. On paper, maybe those matchups aren't super good for Cooper and for Michael Gallup, but, you've got Zeke, and I think that Randall Cobb's really interesting start on the Dallas side as well.
Yeah, I like that you say that, especially about the Detroit receivers. Everybody, I've been watching a lot of the talking heads talk about the drop-off that we're going to see in production from anybody on the offensive side of the ball for Detroit, and I know he's not a world beater type of quarterback, but he is a guy who does a decent job of managing the game. He's a mobile quarterback, so he can make plays happen outside of the pocket that maybe even Matt Stafford can't do. So I think that there's not going to be as significant a drop-off as some people expect because of the talent difference between the two, but I think he can do some things that are a little bit different than what Matthew Stafford brings. But either way, I agree with you. I think you fire up Dallas all the way. Anything you've got on the offensive side of the ball for them, and they expect a lot of points. Bovada's got the over-under set at 47, so definitely a game that we should see some fireworks out of on the offensive side of the ball. All right, what about Denver at Minnesota? Dalvin Cook has been lighting the world on fire. There are 10-point favorites are the Vikings when we look here on Bovada, and Denver, this could be the last game we see Brandon Allen under center. I know Joe Flacco may have seen his last game starting, but Drew Lock came off of the injured reserve to get back to practice this week and should probably see an opportunity to start at some point.
Yeah, you should. But, last we saw Brandon Allen 2 weeks ago. Remember, they played this Browns team who actually looked pretty good defensively last week against the Steelers, or last Thursday. And the Broncos looked pretty good. Brandon Allen, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Philip Lindsay ended up getting a ton of yards, broke off a 40-yard run, had a really good yards per carry otherwise. And then Noah Fant had the big play as well. I think that, in lieu of Emmanuel Sanders being gone, you look at Noah Fant, you look at Cortland Sutton, you look at Philip Lindsay, and this is a funnel offense. So from a fantasy perspective, I think that those 3 guys you can look towards as potentially productive. And this is a Vikings team that, we've assumed they have a great defense, Mike Zimmer, a great defensive mind, but they've been pretty up and down. I mean, they, against Dallas last week, Dallas still got theirs. Dak just worked them over. And so I think that the Broncos, you automatically assume going to play Minnesota is going to be a tough situation for them, but they've, there's definitely a road to those 3 guys still being productive even against this Minnesota defense.
Yeah, you're right, though. Minnesota's defense, we expect it to be good, and they just really haven't been good consistently. They've been good at times, but the consistency hasn't been there. And we talk about consistency on the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball has been the same way. Stephon Diggs has come out and had a couple really, really big games. Adam Thielen's missed time with injuries. Really, the only consistent person on that offense has been Dalvin Cook, and he has been the bell cow that people wanted to see out of him last year. Obviously, he suffers the big injury then, but he's come back, and he looks right at the form that we expected to see him in last year and then some. So Dalvin Cook's a guy you ride, but Adam Thielen going to miss another game. It'll be interesting to see which Minnesota team we see show up, and the line would suggest we see the better of the two.
I think so, but I will say I like Denver to cover this. I think that it's a bad matchup for Minnesota's offense, other than Dalvin Cook. I mean, you've got Chris Harris is like a perfect matchup for Stephon Diggs, and Vic Fangio has a lot of experience playing against the Vikings, generally speaking. So I just think that, I know it's a different offensive coordinator, but I kind of feel like off the bye, Denver is going to keep this interesting. I don't know that they're going to win, but I think that they're going to be, it's going to be, I could see this being a close, low-scoring game.
And if it is, you got to take that dog. All right, what about Saints on the road at Tampa Bay? This is another big game here. New Orleans looking to bounce back. Obviously, the Bucs looking to stay relevant. Jameis Winston looking to keep his job into the future, obviously coming back and throwing another couple of interceptions a week ago. He just can't help but turn the ball over week in and week out.
I wish I loved anything as much as Jameis loves throwing the ball away. Like this dude. And I will say, though, look, Marshawn Lattimore is not going to play this week. The Saints got worked over by the Falcons with a bunch of injuries last week with Hooper and Freeman, and I just, I could see this being a really high-scoring game. The Saints defense has played well, especially when Bridgewater was in, and, the Bucs are so hit or miss, but I feel like both teams are going to put up points. I think this is going to be a fireworks game this week.
Yeah, and obviously the Saints need it. I mean, coming off of the loss to Atlanta, that was a tough look. I know we talked
a tough NFC for the top,
Yeah,
Can't
absolutely.
lose that game.
Yeah, and Drew Brees, he'll look to get back to form. He just couldn't get things going last week, but I think you will see fireworks. I know you talked a lot about Michael Thomas. I would expect this offense to really be firing on all cylinders and getting the ball out in the air quite a bit. I mean, the run game. Latavius Murray has looked great in relief of Alvin Kamara when he's gotten an opportunity, but I think this is a game where you get Kamara out in space. Sure. You could fire up guys like Jared Cook, who obviously Tampa Bay's, I think, been the worst team in the league against tight ends from a fantasy perspective, if not one of them. Arizona's been rough too. Yeah. So I think that's an opportunity if you're looking for somebody. I mean, the tight end position's been very difficult, so if you're in a league where you don't have one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends, maybe that's a guy that you can look to fire up if you can pick him up. So,
what about the other tight end? Do we get are we back with O.J. Howard? Are we buying back?
He is coming off of a good game. What did he have? He had about 70 yards and a touchdown, something in that range.
Played almost every snap for them, which was a departure from what it was before he got hurt with Cameron Brate. So I think that there's a possibility. We drafted O.J. Howard was maybe the 4th or 5th tight end drafted in most drafts. We've forgotten about him, but the reality is this is a super talented guy. They refused to trade him, even though they were offered a lot for him supposedly at the deadline. So maybe this is. I mean, maybe. I just feel like both teams are going to throw the ball a lot. So you could do worse than O.J. Howard.
I like it. What about Buffalo at Miami? These are two teams moving in exact opposite directions. We think about the laughingstock Miami Dolphins from a couple weeks back. they've come in and won 2 straight. Obviously, Brian Hoyer was the quarterback of the Colts last week when they win that game, and he just looked horrible throwing, I think it was 3 picks last week, if I'm not mistaken, but he was coming off of a game where he threw 3 touchdowns in relief of Jacoby Brissett. Brissett will be back this week, but let's talk about Bills-Dolphins. The Bovada line here is 6.5, the road favorite, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare for me to say fire up your Bills passing game, guys, but I feel like you have to. Although this Dolphins team has found something with Ryan Fitzpatrick, like for sure, and it's not surprising that happens. But they've got some juice right now, and I would be afraid. I just don't trust Josh Allen that much, but against this defense, it didn't change. Like it's not like they suddenly added a bunch of all-pro corners. Like they're going to have problems in this secondary, and I just think the Bills are a good team. Like they're probably the 5 seed in this AFC, and I expect them, like a good playoff team, goes in and wins this game by a touchdown.
Do you think Josh Allen's a good start then?
I think I mean, if you've got him, if he's out there, and especially in a 1-quarterback league, like I think you've got to start him, unfortunately. It would be tough for me to do it because I'm just such a hater, but like his floor is so high because he runs, and he's, John Brown's been awesome this year. I think that they've got enough to put up, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns.
So you think those 2 Dolphin wins a little fluky?
Yeah, I do. I mean, but
to say no.
To go on the road to beat the Colts, though, even though Brian Hoyer, I think that was an impressive win. I think it's a good sign for Brian Flores and what they've got going on there in Miami. They're showing a little pride, which I think is a good sign.
Yeah, so the Jacksonville Jaguars and Indianapolis Colts, the other 2 teams that going to be facing off in the 12 o'clock slot. Jacksonville is going to get Nick Foles back. Mm-hmm. That's a big story here. I'd like to hear what you think he can provide a fantasy team if he's somebody that you even think maybe has any value. And the Jacoby Brissett coming off of the slight was MCL sprain. Yeah. He'll be back under center, and the Colts have the home line favorite at 3 points on Bovada.
I'm surprised it's only 3. Like, I know that last week was bad, but look, it was Brian Hoyer, and while I think Brian Hoyer is one of the better backups in the league, like, you get out of your vibe when you go from one quarterback to another, and Jacoby Brissett has been so good for them that I just, like, even with Nick Foles and the way that the Jaguars have played, which is pretty impressive, I think the Colts are definitely a better team. I expect them to come off the mat at home with Brissett and win this game. And I will say, on the Nick Foles side, like we've gotten accustomed to talking about DJ Chark, and I think that, like, if you look back to the preseason and even the first half that Foles played before he got hurt, it was all about D.D. Westbrook, and he's probably owned in your leagues. If he's not, I think that he's a guy that could be a league, like a major, like a wide receiver 2 down the stretch, which you don't just find those guys on the waiver wire.
True sleeper?
Could be. I've got another guy.
Fair. So you think the Colts win this one outright? I'm a little concerned about T.Y. Hilton still being out. I mean, he's a guy that if you own, you've been very frustrated because every week they refuse to rule him out, but every week he looks doubtful. And when does he come back? I mean, that is a huge hit for me with Jacoby Brissett's value, but also really with this Colts offense altogether. They're going to try to run the ball, and obviously if the defense of Jacksonville zeroes in on Marlon Mack, it makes Jacoby Brissett's job a lot more difficult.
It does, but 2 weeks ago with Hilton out, he just lit it up, and he and Zach Pascal have a thing, and I'm a big Zach Pascal guy. I think that last week was a fluke. I think that he comes back and has a good game for them, especially against the secondary with AJ Bouye, but again, without Jalen Ramsey, they have not been the same defense at all. So I think that I like Pascal. I think that Brissett's going to be fine. They'll probably use a lot of Nyheim Hines if they do key on Marlon Mack, and that's a good sign for Brissett too, because those are all short passes. And beyond that, Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, both super active in the pass game, which I think is a great sign for Brissett as well. Yeah,
good point. Doyle's been coming on strong. Ebron, very inconsistent this season. Mm-hmm. Very frustrating if you own either of these guys. They kind of cancel each other out when you look at it fantasy-wise. But as far as just getting targets and being able to kind of maybe take a little bit of the pressure off of Brissett that maybe not having T.Y. Hilton maybe provides, that should help.
I mean, you want T.Y. Hilton, obviously, if you've got Brissett, but like I think that having those guys, it's not a huge drop-off because of Frank Reich's offense and because Brissett's been, really good.
All right, this might be the game of the week this week, Anshu. You've got Houston going on the road to take on Baltimore. You've got 2 of the best young quarterbacks in the game. Bovada's got Baltimore as 4.5-point favorites. They think a lot of points in this one. 51.5, that's one of the highest point totals. If it looks like second highest point total of the weekend. And these are 2 teams that, at least historically have a pretty good defense, but Lamar Jackson has just gotten blown up so much over these past couple weeks. Obviously, he had the big highlight play against my I'm just going to say pathetic Bengals at this point. But, I mean, he has looked great, and Deshaun Watson, he's no slouch either.
No, I mean, I'm excited, super excited for this game because of what it means for fantasy, what it means for reality. Like, I mean, this is a Houston team that's coming off the bye and I think is going to be ready to, throw the ball down the field. But the Ravens, ever since they traded for Marcus Peters, have been a totally different defense. They got Jimmy Smith back. Their corners, those three guys are awesome. And they match up really well with the Texans. I absolutely love the Ravens in this game. I think that this is borderline Shu-in of the week right here. I think that they win this game by at least 6 points. In fact, I'm going to say it. I think that they cover this 4.5 at Bovada, relatively, not easily, but I think it's going to be a good game. But I expect them fully to win, especially now that J.J. Watt's out. Who is slowing down who? By the way, Marquise Brown, guaranteed touchdown for me this week. I'm telling you right now.
He's still questionable with the ankle.
If he's playing, okay, fair enough. If he plays, and I think he is going to play, he is a lock to score in this game, in my opinion, or break off a couple big plays.
I like the confidence that you have in Baltimore. I just feel like this is the kind of position that this Baltimore team could potentially see a letdown. And
could be. With Flacco, they always did it. That's
true.
A fact.
But we saw that against Cleveland earlier this year. I'm not all the way there with this Baltimore team. Obviously, the win against
last week,
New England. Obviously, the win 2 weeks ago against the Patriots was a huge sign that they are for real. But you come in and you beat the hell out of the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's Ryan Finley's first start. AJ Green doesn't end up playing. Their defense just looks worse and worse every week. I think coming off of a game like that where you really don't have any test, let alone a true test, now against a team that is going to be a legitimate test because they're going to put up points. Yeah. I know you said the corners have been playing great. I know Baltimore's defense is playing better of late. I think that this game could be closer. I don't know if I'm quite there with the level of confidence that you have. I think Baltimore probably does win this game, but I think it's probably a field goal either way.
I hope it is because I hope it's a high
just for the pure entertainment value.
These two guys are two of the top 4 MVP candidates in my mind without any shadow of a doubt. Deshaun Watson is going to put this team on his back for the rest of the season, but the Ravens are a lock to make the playoffs to me at this point. The Texans are not, and I would be a little bit concerned about if they lose this game and they drop another one here in the next few weeks because they've been a little shaky. Like their games in Europe, they've been a little shaky. I worry about them a little bit. By the way, Kenny Stills is going to play, but Will Fuller is out, which means again Kenny Stills is an option if they can break off a couple deep plays. This is going to be a really interesting game if that happens.
Yeah, look for a lot of volume for DeAndre Hopkins in this one. He's kind of had a little bit of a down year, at least by his
going
standards.
Down the field as much.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I think that this is a game where he could have one of those DeAndre Hopkins-esque kind of signature games, even though he's playing against good competition. He's one of those guys that should be able to be productive regardless, and some of those other receivers, some of the other injuries they have on the offensive side of the ball should give them an opportunity to get him the ball a little bit more. Mm-hmm. All right, what about Jets-Redskins? This is, can I call this my dumpster fire of the week, even though it hasn't happened yet?
Yes.
We've got the Jets who have been playing some of the worst football in the league of late. I mean, obviously, earlier in the year they looked good at times. Darnold has been inconsistent. He had the mono bout. He's been very frustrating. But the Washington Redskins are going to go to Dwayne Haskins for the remainder of the season. So they're willing to see if he's the quarterback of the future, or at least give him the opportunity, which should, he has not looked good at all. No. I mean, this game could just end up being a defensive 3-0, 6-0.
Like that Skins
9-6, horrible game
against the the Niners, 9-0 or something. I know that was a really sloppy game, but
the rain battle.
And there's been this thing on Twitter basically that's been going around that's basically Bill Callahan seems to somehow Washington has played 3 of the 5 shortest games of the season, and the idea is that Bill Callahan, ever since Callahan became the coach, and the idea is that maybe he just is trying to run the ball and end these games and get through this season with
as healthy as possible.
Yeah, as healthy as possible. And so, that being said, the Jets have had major issues guarding deep balls. If you look at their last few games, they played the Jaguars. TJ Chark went off. They played the Dolphins. That was a huge game for Devontae Parker. And then they played the Giants last week, and we saw what Darius Slayton did to them. So My eyes are wide open on Terry McLaurin this week. We've kind of forgotten about him ever since the injuries and Keenum was gone. But
he had the rapport with Keenum.
Yeah, but I think if Haskins has his head on straight and they're able to block it up, this could be a good game for Terry McLaurin.
I like that. I mean, it has been a few weeks. He came out firing, and he had that. Like I mentioned, he had the rapport with Keenum and Terry McLaurin. He obviously played at Ohio State, so this could be an Ohio State connection.
Haskins,
they played together in college, so you expect him to want to get him the ball. I kind of like it. I still don't think you've officially put your stamp on a sleeper of the week, so I feel like you've got somebody. I'm excited to hear who it is. But Jets, Redskins, Bovada's got it at 2. I mean, this is a coin flip to me. I'm staying as far away from it as possible. Yeah. The only way this game gets shown on a TV around me is if it's on the Red Zone channel and one of these teams is somehow scoring.
This is going to be the game that Red Zone forgets for sure this week, guaranteed.
Let's hope so. All right, what about Arizona and San Francisco? San Francisco finally loses a game, but they had every opportunity to win it last week against Seattle. I mean, Russell Wilson throws the interception in the red zone, gives the Niners an opportunity. Obviously, they have the kicker out of Illinois, McLaughlin, who comes in. He makes a big kick to send it to OT. Then he buckles under the pressure in overtime. But San Francisco looking to bounce back against Arizona. And Arizona now officially going to a running back by committee with Kenyon Drake and David Johnson. I mean, obviously, you unloaded David Johnson in a league we have near and dear to our hearts. But what are your thoughts on how this looks going forward? I know they trade for Drake. I know he had the injury to Edmonds after he looks great. What happens when Edmonds gets back? What does this backfield look like?
I mean, it's going to be interesting because David Johnson isn't even on the injury report for Arizona this week, which is just like, how is that possible? Cliff Kingsbury,
and they have a bye coming up next week.
And they have a bye next week. So, I'm shocked. I think that they're going to end up using him more as a receiver, and they're going to use a ton of Drake. And we didn't really get to this, but with Cleveland, Kareem Hunt, similar to what Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb got you, the way that they're kind of being used in concert. But David Johnson is actually playing the Kareem Hunt role now, it seems like.
And they're both similar style of running back. I mean, Kenyon Drake is more of a third down style of a back, but we saw him when he had the featured role. He looked pretty darn good.
Against a great defense in San Francisco. Yeah, no, I think that... Look, again, I keep trying to say this, but what Arizona has done this year with a total overhaul, a brand new offense, a horrible defense, just putrid, has been so impressive to me. What Cliff Kingsbury's on, and I am very eager to see what they look like next year because I think we might see a big-time leap. But my sleeper of the week is in this game, and it is on the San Francisco side. It is Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, all right, so Emmanuel Sanders may or may not play. It really doesn't matter to me because George Kittle's doubtful. He's probably not going to play. They're not really riding Ross Dwelly, even though, Arizona's been so bad against tight ends. I think that means Deebo Samuel over the middle, doing different sorts of things, is going to be interesting. And another reason why is because Matt Breida's out for this game, so Raheem Mostert jumps in.
Still questionable, right? Is he? I think he's still questionable.
Breida is?
No, Mostert.
Oh, Mostert is. Yeah,
Breida's out.
Yeah, Breida's out. So all I'm saying is
by the time this game kicks off, you're probably right. Mostert will be in there.
Mostert will probably be in there, and Kittle's going to be out. And I think that Sanders, we'll see, maybe not. Even if he does, he's going to be banged up. And then I think that means there's going to be targets for Deebo Samuel as long as the quarterback gets the ball to the receiver, which is a question mark because Jimmy, dude, all your thoughts about Jimmy from the preseason came to fruition in that game. He's got problems. I promise you, he will be the reason they don't win the Super Bowl this year. Jimmy Garoppolo.
That's exactly what I said when that game ended. I know we were in that group text, and it's not like I want him to be good. I have no reason to not like Jimmy Garoppolo. I have no reason to not like San Francisco.
Yeah,
they're the easiest team to root. Yeah, except for our friend. But they're the easiest undefeated team to root for right now because they don't really have unlikable personalities on that team. They do it do it in a great way. I mean, they've got a great running game, and they do it with 3 different guys, and they're all guys that kind of stay under the radar, keep quiet, keep to themselves. They don't really have that diva personality on that team. I would say the closest thing to that probably is Emmanuel Sanders, and he's a guy they traded for. And the only reason he's like that is because he's had the jawing back and forth with Antonio Brown. So
that's right.
I find it. I think the Niners bounce back here, and I don't know if it's because of Garoppolo necessarily.
They're just better.
I think they're just significantly better than the Arizona Cardinals. Do I think they're going to cover the 10 points on Bovada? I don't know if I'm quite there. Just because, to your point, Arizona has been very much a wild card this year. Not from a playoff standpoint, but they've been a wild card in that they surprise us at times.
Yeah.
So I would not be surprised
if this played.
Yeah, and it was relatively close.
It was a good game. Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if it is a similar style of game and that Arizona puts up just enough points to keep it close. You mentioned how bad their defense is, but a bad defense against a mediocre quarterback isn't always, they could look better than they actually are as a team defense against Jimmy Garoppolo.
I agree. And beyond that, by the way, they better take care of business the same, because if you look at San Francisco's schedule the rest of the year, they play the Packers on Sunday night next week. Then they go to Baltimore, to New Orleans. They play a Falcons team that looked pretty good. They play the Rams, then they go to Seattle. I mean, that does not, to me, I look at that schedule. They could be 10-6.
They could be 10-6.
I mean, they were 8-0.
Yeah,
they were 8-0. Like 9. Were they 9-0? Like they're in the playoffs for sure, unless they just totally go in the tank. But like this is kind of
it's a big game,
must win for them. Like they, even if they go beat the Packers next week, I just think that there is a path. There's two halves to every NFL season, and there's still a lot of football to be played. And I'm just saying, like, with this quarterback, I would be a little concerned.
There would not, if I had to give my power rankings of teams right now, they would not be my number one after that game. And even if they win that game, I don't know if I could put them as my number one team in a power ranking system, just because I don't believe. I mean, we've seen bad quarterbacks win Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. And I would say Garoppolo's better than some of the quarterbacks we've seen play in Super Bowls. You think back to Rex Grossman and some of the really bad quarterbacks. They
didn't win though,
right? But I'm saying even getting
Flacco.
To the Super Bowl,
he could get on a Flacco.
Buccaneers was
Trent Dilfer or Brad Johnson.
Trent Dilfer. I mean, we've seen bad quarterbacks play in big games because their defense has been able to get them there, and I think the Niners' defense has been playing great. But we saw what Seattle did to them. Yep. They're definitely a beatable team, and I think Garoppolo, when he was put in a pressure situation in that game at times in overtime, he folded. He looked terrible under pressure. And
that is not a great Seahawks defense for the record.
He did look great, though.
He looked incredible. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that the linebackers were a problem. But I think the Niners thing is just interesting.
Garoppolo was like throwing passes right to middle linebackers.
When it comes to the playoffs and you have to play Breeze, Wilson, Rodgers, Prescott the way he's been playing, possibly Wentz. I mean, Goff and McVay, if you rank those guys, Garoppolo's at the bottom.
Goff's right there, though, this year.
Goff's been terrible.
He's taking a huge step backwards, which
we're getting there.
We'll get there. But we've got a couple more 3 o'clock games, then we've got the night games, and then we'll wrap things up. But wanted to get to New England and Philadelphia. This game is very interesting to me. I want to see which New England team we're going to get. Was that a fluke against Baltimore? And is Philadelphia a legitimate playoff contender? Carson Wentz may not have Alshon Jeffrey. It almost looks likely that he won't. Deshaun Jackson is now on IR. The Eagles' backfield is banged up. Jordan Howard looks unlikely to play in this one. What are we going to see? They do sign Jay Ajayi, who is a former Eagle. I don't think he gets much burn in this game. What are we going to see out of this Eagles team? And they're at home. They really need to show something here against New England.
Absolutely. There's some good games this week, by the way. This is a huge game.
This is another one. Could potentially call this one the game of the week. Could potentially say Houston, Baltimore, a couple others that we're going to get to. But I think this
Raiders.
One... I can't even. But the Eagles, if they win this game, we're talking about them in a whole different way. But they're not doing it at full strength. So 4.5-point dogs at home. What do you think? Do you agree with Bovada?
I like the Eagles to cover 4.5 at home. I think as a home dog, they're going to keep it within 3. But the Patriots off a bye scare me. Both teams off a bye. 2 good coaching staffs. And like you said, the injuries are a problem for the Eagles. And that secondary is a disaster. So while their run defense has been really good, I'm interested to see how this Patriots passing game looks, because Tom Brady has quietly not had a great season, especially towards the last few weeks. And from a fantasy perspective, it's been iffy. He needs to get right against this Eagles secondary.
And their secondary is weak. Yeah. And this is a game where he needs to get right, to your point. But I feel like this is a game where we need to see if Brady's still Brady.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think if he has a subpar game against an Eagles secondary, I mean, even if they lose to the Eagles, but he puts up big numbers,
I think fine.
At least, we're fine with that, right? And I think Tom Brady needs to show that he's still got it, and if he doesn't do that in this game against a very subpar secondary and against a banged up Philadelphia offense, you're going to start hearing the rumblings of, is it time? Is Tom Brady, is he at the end of the rope now? Are we ready to say it's time to retire? So this game for both teams is I think it's a very integral point of the season for both of these teams. And
huge pivot
for
game.
Philly being it that they're at home and that they're banged up and that they really need a win, and for New England just trying to kind of stay New England and show that Tom Brady's still Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles have the Patriots and the Seahawks these next 2 weeks before basically having like a 3-week bye week stretch, and so
they play the Bengals.
They play the Dolphins, Giants, and Washington.
Oh, wow.
So, and then they play the Cowboys and then the Giants again. So, like, they're probably, they've got 4 wins banked. They got to win one of these 2 games at home. I think they'd rather beat the Seahawks just because of conference stuff. But this is a great opportunity, again, with the injuries, to step up. And I actually think that Alshon Jeffrey being hurt isn't that much of a loss for them, only because, like, Stephon Gilmore would just lock him down. There's no way that Jeffrey does anything. He's so slow. It's just like a disaster matchup.
It'd help him in the red zone. That's about it.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. But now that you get to use the 2 tight ends, you can be a little bit more creative. And sometimes when you've really got that skeleton group, it brings out the best in your coach. And I think that this is an opportunity to do that for Doug Peterson.
Miles Sanders, you said this before the show off air. I think this is a week he gets a lot of burn and he can show what he can do. I mean, people forget he's shown a couple times this year what he's. But the Eagles every year, it's that running back by committee. You don't know who's going to be the guy week in and week out. We've seen Jordan Howard do it at times. You think back last year, they have a different guy every week in their 4 running back committee. Just the most frustrating. Wendell Smallwood. I mean, it's just brutal. Darren Sproles still somehow on the roster this year. He's out for the year now. But I mean, this is a game. As much as I don't particularly care about either one of these teams, I care about what happens in this game as an NFL fan
and as a fantasy fan. Tons of guys. I mean, Sanu, N'Keal Harry's going to be active.
Yep.
There's a lot of pieces on both sides. I'm fascinated. This is a fascinating game.
Agreed. So from one fascinating game to one very much the opposite, the Cincinnati Bengals this week are going to Oakland, halfway across the country, to just absolutely put a dumpster fire on that field. They might light the field on fire with the trash that they're going to be spewing, but they come into Oakland as 11.5-point underdogs. The one thing I will say in a positive light for the Bengals is that Joe Mixon finally gets some touches last week. He goes 30 for 114. He has another, I think it was 40 yards or so on the through the air. He's from about 30 minutes away from this Oakland stadium. He's very excited to go back home and perform. I think they're going to give the ball to Joe Mixon a lot.
Yep.
I'm very excited to be starting him in one particular league.
I would be too.
I'm not excited about anything else this Bengals offense can do. AJ Green's not playing. It looks like Alex Erickson's not going to play, and he's pretty much a negative anyway. But Oakland, Waller, Josh Jacobs, everything.
Derek
Carr,
Williams,
start them all. They are going to put up
Renfro?
60 points in this game.
I will say, I think the Mixon thing is super interesting because when you think about the Raiders, last time we saw the Raiders was that Thursday night against the Chargers, and the only thing that worked for the Chargers was Melvin Gordon and like a little bit of Eckler, but really Melvin Gordon. And so to that end, I think that Mixon, he's been off and on for you over the year, but man, he's going to come out, I think, in the second half and be a real asset.
He's a volume guy.
Yeah,
he's a bell cow running back, kind of like a Melvin Gordon.
Yeah.
And we heard Melvin Gordon his first game back. He gets 8 touches. He's very critical of the play calling. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of running back Joe Mixon is. And this year, there have been games where he's had 8 touches.
Yeah, that's
you cannot do that with a running back like that. Yeah. So I think that they realized, even though they lost by 100 points last week, Zeke is like, you saw it last week. Mm-hmm. Those are guys that they need the ball 20 to 25 times a game, and if you give them the ball that many times a game, regardless of game script, they'll be productive. Yeah, last week, even though he was productive, the Bengals get killed. They made sure he got the ball and make him part of the game plan, and he's productive. I don't think they care if they get killed at this point. So you might as well showcase Joe Mixon because you have nobody else on the offensive side of the ball that you can do that with now anyway.
I agree. I will say one thing about, Alex Erickson being out kind of sucks, but I think that, what we saw last week a little bit was that Ryan Finley was going to Tyler Eifert a little bit more. Again.
He did catch the touchdown.
I mean, you got Eifert, Tate. It's going to be funneled to 3 guys now, Boyd, Tate, Eifert, and I think that those guys, like,
somebody's got to get the ball.
Someone does, but also like they're young. Like Tate is not Eifert, but Tate and Boyd. Like you think about the future. Say they don't give AJ what he wants. Like Auden Tate is probably your starting outside receiver, and now this is a great chance for them to get going with him and figure out if Finley's got like a vibe with him. And I think that's. It's going to be a really great opportunity. There a lot of good stuff can come from a wreckage like this, and this is a great these are important benchmarks when you look forward for a team. And I think that there's something, and from a fantasy perspective, we can take advantage of those situations.
Yeah, and the Bengals already suffer one loss this weekend with Tua going down, so we're going to see a lot of Joe Burrow.
They need to get the number 1 pick now.
I mean, they will. They will. They still have to play Miami.
They're too clear of Miami now.
Yeah, it's. I hope we do at this point. All right, moving on. Your favorite team in the NFC North, the Chicago Bears, going to L.A. to take on the Rams. This is another game that's very intriguing to me. The Bears kind of in a must-win situation. If they lose, I think their playoff chances go down the drains. But also Jared Goff, we just alluded to this earlier. He has been absolutely terrible this year. The Rams, 6-point favorites at home on Bovada. They absolutely need a get-right game, maybe more than anybody in the league.
Maybe. I mean, and I hate to say this, you know how loath I am to pick the Bears. I think that them +6 is maybe not a guarantee, but it feels like, I mean, look, the Rams, they lose even more interior defensive or offensive lineman injury. Jared Goff has been a disaster under pressure this year, and especially under pressure. And I just think that the Bears are a problem matchup for them. Now, on the other side, they cannot move the ball at all. They are so bad. Mitch Trubisky is, again,
how do you love it?
The worst quarterback in football. I would rather start Ryan Finley than Mitch Trubisky. No, I wouldn't. But it's close. Crazy. I would definitely start Dalton over him. That's not even a question in my mind.
I posed this question to our friend who's a Bears fan last week. We were watching a couple of the games together. Would you take Andy Dalton right now as a starting quarterback? And
it's not even a question.
Yeah, and that's coming from a Bears fan who owns a Mitch Trubisky jersey.
Ugh. Well,
that was a mistake.
That's a horrible decision on his part. But
I mean, I own a Dalton jersey, so.
By the way, I love the under in this game. I know it's low. I can't believe we're talking about a McVay game where the over-under is 40. But remember last year, the Rams come to the Bears. The Rams were an unstoppable force at this point, and the Bears humbled them at Soldier Field. And I think that that's maybe a precursor. I mean, I don't think the Bears win this game, but I think that, they're a problem matchup defensively for them.
Agreed. This another intriguing matchup. These two very clashing personalities from just the way that they manage a football game. The Bears obviously defensive minded, like you've said, can't move the ball. The Rams love to get the ball up and down the field. There still are some significant injuries. Cooks is still dealing with the concussion. Yep. He could potentially miss the rest of the season. I don't know how severe it is, but he's out for the foreseeable future. Robert Woods has not been the type of player we've expected, and obviously Cooper Kupp's had some issues as well. So, Gerald Everett's up and down. You don't know what you're getting. The backfield has been banged up. This game is it's one of those things you want to know a little bit more about both of these teams, and I think we should get an opportunity to see that on Sunday night. All right, we've got one more game on Shu.
It's in Mexico.
It is in Mexico at
Estadio
Azteca.
Yeah, see.
Kansas City Chiefs, Los Angeles Chargers. We buried the Chargers a few weeks ago. They finally seem to have found a little something. They need a get-right game too, but obviously the Chiefs coming off of a big loss in their own right to Tennessee. What's giving here? I mean, Bovada's got it at 4. The Chiefs, the road favorite. I would think that the Chiefs would road favorite. Yeah, obviously a neutral site. You would think that the Chiefs should win this game, but I don't know what to expect out of Phillip Rivers week in and week out. It's almost ironic that I had Jameis Winston and Phillip Rivers on my team until I just traded Rivers because they're the same person this year.
Yeah, that's weird. Like Rivers,
generally not that guy.
No, but he has like 2 or 3 of those a year, and he is.
He's had more than that.
Yeah.
But he's also had a couple great games. So what do you see? Kansas City is definitely a team that you can beat through the air. That you can have and on the ground. Yeah. So I don't know. Another one. Fascinating. There's 4 or 5 games this week that we've talked about, and I know we can probably you can sense it in our voices how excited we are to get to this slate. Other than the Bengals Raiders game
and the Packers
bye. But this is another one. I mean, 4 or 5 games that really just very intriguing matchups that clashing styles. You need to know like who's going to come out victorious because it's going to say a lot about going forward. Mm-hmm. And we know that there's when you put things in a capsule, they maybe don't matter as much. But at this point in the season, we have to assume that these games do matter and that what we're seeing on the field has some bearing on what's going to happen going forward.
Absolutely. And it would be so Chargers to come off the deck after that embarrassing loss to the Raiders and an embarrassing performance by Rivers and just have him light it up in Mexico and make it a great game. And I mean, I do expect it to be a good game. The field is going to suck. Like, it's going to be in bad shape, and that generally helps the offense a lot. So I'm expecting a lot of points. Two, opponents very familiar with each other. Derwin James not going to be back for this game. And I just think that the Chiefs, like Patrick Mahomes, hurt, quote unquote, comes back, throws for 450 yards last week. Like, this is against a good Titans defense. Like, right. I mean, guy is, to me, it's not even close right now between him and, I guess, like Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson. Like, obviously, Mahomes isn't going to win the MVP at this point, but the way he's playing is just so on another level, and I expect him to go in this game. And I think, obviously, if you have Tyreek Hill, the interesting thing with the Chiefs is Damian Williams, because Josh Jacobs did a number on the Chargers, and I think Damian Williams, if he has now taken over, control of that backfield, and with the way that I expect those field conditions to be, I think Damian Williams could be a super sneaky, awesome play this week.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, again, a lot of intriguing matchups. I think your lock of the week was the Ravens.
The Ravens, yep.
Your Shu-in of the week was Devo.
Devo. Oh, Shu-in? Yeah. Sleeper, yeah. Sleepers.
I'm getting him mixed up.
It's funny. I think that's part of the gig.
All right. Anything we missed? Anything you are watching? Anything that we
What's
didn't
your dumpster
touch on?
fire? Is it that game, the Jets Skins game?
I mean, I think my dumpster fire is usually looking back on the previous week. I mean, I guess my dumpster fire of the week we started the show out with. It was not even about the game itself. It's just what took place. It was 20 seconds left in the game. Ugh. What we saw on the field. That's unprecedented. Seeing a
you must have loved that. Your two probably most hated teams.
They are, but I don't. I mean, I guess I love the circus of it because they're both. I do hate both of those teams so much, but
it's almost
as
like
a football fan, it was like you're so surprised by the fact that this is actually happening. Like, I was almost in shock.
Yeah, me too.
But that has to be the dumpster fire.
Oh, I totally agree. Like of course the Browns, like this, the way their season's gone, they finally get a little something going. You got 2 games in a row. Your offense is starting to click a little. You got Kareem Hunt, and now you lose your 2 best defensive players for at least a week. You lose your best one for the rest of the season. And you're embarrassed. Like, it's an embarrassment, and that's been the way the Browns' MO really for the last few seasons.
Yeah, the more those 2 teams embarrass themselves, the better off I will feel. But I'm excited to get back. Sorry we missed you guys last week. A lot going on. We've got quite a bit going on in our personal lives, but we definitely wanted to get back to the grind and get back to you guys, and we appreciate you coming back and listening to us, and we won't let it happen again. But we will see you guys next week. If anything you wanted to add.
Oh, that's it. We're good.
For Anshu, I am Josh Dunn. Our time has come to an end on the Underdog Sports Fantasy Hour. See you guys next week.